It was a Saturday morning, the kind where the air still carries the scent of last night's rain and the coffee practically brews itself out of habit. I was standing at the kitchen sink, staring out the window like I always do. Backyard looked the same. Fence still leaning slightly to the left. Kathy's little herb garden still thriving, though I swear she forgets to water it half the time. She was upstairs, probably scrolling through her phone in bed or doing that thing where she reads half a magazine article and leaves it open on the nightstand like she'll come back to it. The house was quiet, not in a cold way, in a familiar way. That kind of silence that settles in after 2 decades of marriage and raising kids. Comfortable. Predictable. I made breakfast like I usually did on weekends. Scrambled eggs, toast, a little too much butter on her slice, just how she likes it, or used to like it. We've been married for 17 years. 2 kids. 1 dog. Mortgage halfway paid. The usual American dream, maybe with a few extra cracks in the drywall. But we were good. Or so I thought. I poured her coffee, set her plate on the table, and made mine. I even chuckled a little when I noticed she left one of her earrings by the sink again. Little things like that, they used to annoy me. Now they made the place feel lived in. Real. Back when we first met, she was wild in this quiet sort of way. Not the kind to dance on tables, but she had a spark. We were both working the same night shift at a grocery store, her in the bakery, me hauling stock in the back. She'd bring me fresh rolls just out of the oven when no one was looking. I think I fell for her before I even realized I was hungry. I thought we had built something solid. Years go by, and you stop second-guessing the little stuff. You just assume the foundation's still strong because the walls haven't caved in. That morning was no different than 100 others. Coffee. Toast. Quiet. But if I had known what was coming, if I had known what tiny, stupid thing was going to blow it all open, maybe I would have paid more attention to how she looked at her phone. Maybe I would have asked why she suddenly needed a weekend away for her friend's bachelorette party. But I didn't. Because nothing felt off. Not yet. It started with laundry. Of all things, laundry. Kathy had left a pile of clothes on the bedroom chair, like she always does when she's planning to get to it later, which usually means I'll fold it. I didn't mind. Folding laundry is one of those mindless tasks that gives your hands something to do while your brain spins its wheels. I was sorting socks when I noticed something that didn't belong. A little tag sticking out of a delicate piece of fabric. At first, I thought it was something of Emily's. Our daughter had left some of her laundry behind after a weekend visit. But then I realized it wasn't Emily's. It wasn't anything I'd seen before. It was a lace thing. Brand new. Tag still attached. Bright red. Now, I've been married long enough to know the entire contents of my wife's underwear drawer, not because I go through it, but because I've done enough laundry to know what's normal and what isn't. And this? This was not normal. Kathy wasn't the kind of woman who wore bright red lace. She was more of a comfortable cotton and neutral tones type. Practical. Sensible. Unless there was some secret Valentine's Day I missed, this made 0 sense. I stood there holding it in my hand, like I was trying to convince myself it meant nothing. But that stupid little tag flapping in the air? That was the point of no return. The worst part? My first instinct wasn't anger. It was doubt. Not in her, in me. I wondered if I'd bought it for her and forgot. I actually stood there trying to convince myself that maybe I'd given her a surprise gift I couldn't remember giving. Like my brain was trying to throw me a lifeline I didn't ask for. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't mine. It wasn't hers either. Not really, not in the way that made sense. It was someone else's idea of what she should wear. Someone else's hands that probably picked it out. The thing went right back where I found it. I didn't say a word. Didn't ask questions. Just walked downstairs and poured myself another cup of coffee with hands that suddenly felt too shaky. Everything was still in its place. The house, the walls, the picture frames with our smiles frozen in time. But something had changed. The kind of change you don't see. You feel it, like a storm rolling in even when the sky is clear. I stared out the window again. Same backyard. Same fence. But now it all looked different. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like a stranger in my own life. After that morning, nothing was just normal anymore. Every little thing she did felt like it had a hidden meaning behind it. I wasn't paranoid, at least that's what I told myself. I was just observant, hyper-aware. Like a soldier scanning the horizon for movement, even if the field looks empty. She had told me she was going to a bachelorette weekend in Santa Barbara. Her best friend's second marriage. I didn't even like the guy, but I smiled and nodded when she brought it up. At the time, I didn't question it. Girls' weekends weren't unusual. She packed the usual stuff. Sandals, beach towel, a light sundress. But now I kept circling back to that lace thong. It sure as hell didn't scream, wholesome girls trip. I started replaying everything in my head. How she suddenly started going to Pilates twice a week, after years of saying yoga bored her. How she switched her perfume. How she began taking longer showers. At first, I thought maybe she was just doing a little self-care, getting her groove back, or whatever they call it. But now it looked like she was preparing for someone. Not me. I'd catch her smiling at her phone, then quickly turning the screen away when I got close. Once, I asked what was so funny. She said it was just a meme from her friend Rachel. Except Kathy doesn't even like memes. Never has. She says they're a waste of time. My gut told me something was off, but my brain kept trying to smooth it over. You've been together this long. She wouldn't do that. You're overthinking. And maybe I was. Maybe I was seeing shadows that weren't there. But then again, sometimes the shadows are real. They just hide where the light doesn't reach. I started paying closer attention. What time she left. What time she got back. How often she checked her phone. I felt like a detective in my own house, scribbling mental notes while pretending everything was fine. I couldn't sleep without turning it all over in my head like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Was it just the underwear? Or had there been signs I missed long before that? The memories came creeping in. Nights she stayed out, just a little later than planned. A strange charge on the credit card for a spa she never mentioned. The time she came back from her friend's house with a different hairstyle, subtle, but different. I was floundering, caught between wanting to believe in my wife and being scared that I already knew the truth. And the worst part? I still hadn't said a single word to her. I've never been the jealous type. Really. I'm the guy who doesn't check phones, doesn't snoop, doesn't ask a million questions. Trust was kind of my thing. But trust, I've learned, is a little like a chair. Once a leg breaks, you can still sit on it, but you're going to feel off balance the whole time. After that weekend, I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed answers. Not theories, not hunches. Facts. First step? Go digital. Her phone had a lock on it now. That was new. 6 months ago, she didn't even have a lock. Suddenly, it was Face ID and secrecy like she worked for the CIA. I wasn't going to break into her phone. That wasn't my style. But I could work around it. She synced her phone to our shared laptop once in a while to back up photos. I fired it up while she was out one morning, and, sure enough, some new files were sitting in the recent folder. Most of them were innocent enough. Pictures of sunsets, food, her, and her friends at brunch. But there was one video short, shaky, clearly taken from a hotel room balcony. The weird thing? She never mentioned staying in a hotel. Said they rented a beach house. In the background, I could hear two voices laughing. One was definitely Kathy's. The other was a man's. Not someone I recognized. Not her brother, not a family friend. Just a deep, confident laugh that made my stomach twist. That was the moment I stopped hoping I was wrong. I took a screenshot of the video's file path and stored it in a folder she wouldn't find. Then I cleared my tracks. No paranoia, no confrontation. Just preparation. Next, I started paying closer attention to her schedule. I wrote it all down. When she left, when she came back, any inconsistencies. I didn't tail her or do anything crazy. I'm not that guy. But I started mentally tracking patterns. Little things. Gaps. Changes in her routine that didn't add up. On Tuesday, she said she had a late meeting. Her car GPS history said she went to a downtown hotel. I didn't bring it up. Just logged it. By Thursday, I knew what I had to do. I called up an old buddy of mine. Let's call him Nate. Used to work in loss prevention. Knows a thing or two about surveillance. I told him I needed help keeping an eye on someone. I didn't say who. He didn't ask. He set me up with a little GPS tracker, nothing fancy, just a magnetic one that clips under the car. Legal in our state if you own the vehicle, and I did. Still do. Slipped it on while she was at the grocery store. Took all of 10 seconds. Now, I could stop guessing. Now, I could see. Every time she drove off, I checked the app. Most of the time it lined up with where she said she'd be. But Friday night? That was different. She said she was going to her sister's place for a girls' night. Wine, movies, all that. The tracker? It said she went downtown again. Same hotel. Same damn spot. I sat there staring at the screen, heart pounding but hand steady. It was like catching a lie in real time. Cold. Clinical. No drama. Just the data. And just like that, I stopped wondering. Now I was watching. Friday night hit harder than I expected. It's one thing to suspect something. It's another to sit alone in your living room, watching a blinking dot on your phone screen park outside a hotel at 9:17 p.m. and not move again until nearly 2 a.m. She said she was staying at her sister's. I even helped her pack a little overnight bag, like the idiot I am. Threw in her phone charger. Gave her a kiss on the cheek. She took the bag, took the lie, and drove it downtown. The next morning, she came home around 9. Hair a little tousled, sweatshirt 2 sizes too big. I assumed it was borrowed from whoever she'd spent the night with. She tossed the overnight bag in the laundry room and made herself a smoothie like it was just another Saturday. Meanwhile, I stood in the garage pretending to organize tools I hadn't used in months, just to stop myself from doing something. I waited until she left to go to the gym, another newly adopted habit, and I opened the laundry bag. At first, it was the usual. Leggings, sports bra, toothbrush. But then I found something tucked into the inside pocket of her makeup bag, a folded piece of paper. A printed email. Not from her sister. From a travel agency. Reservation confirmation. 2 names. Hers, and a man named Ethan. 1 room. 2 nights. At the very same hotel I tracked her to. I sat down on the edge of the washer, holding that piece of paper like it might burst into flames. I read it 3 times, just to be sure I wasn't making something up in my head. But there it was, date, time, her name, his name. And just like that, it wasn't a theory anymore. She was cheating. No metaphor. No maybe. It was real. It was in my house. It was in my hands. And it was happening while I was still folding her laundry and fixing things around the house and checking the oil in her car. That afternoon, I drove to the hotel. I didn't go inside. Just parked across the street, watched people come and go. I think I needed to see it with my own eyes. To feel how close it all was. How easily a life can split down the middle without anyone noticing. I sat there for almost an hour. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just stared at the glass doors like they might give me answers. They didn't. But I had enough now. Enough to know I wasn't crazy. Enough to stop second-guessing every weird little moment from the last few months. And definitely enough to move on to the next phase. There's this weird kind of silence that follows a moment of truth. It's not peaceful. It's heavy. Like something sitting on your chest, but it's invisible. You breathe, but it doesn't feel like you're getting air. That's how the whole weekend felt. I knew. She was having an affair. Not a one-time mistake. Not a drunken slip. This was coordinated. Planned. Hotel reservations, overnight bags, cover stories, the whole playbook. But I didn't confront her. I didn't flip the table or demand answers. I didn't even bring it up over dinner when she asked if I wanted more roasted potatoes. I just said sure, thanks. Because I wasn't ready to go to war without a strategy. Here's the thing. I loved her. Or maybe I loved who she used to be. Or who I used to be when I was with her. I don't know. But I'd spent years building a life with this woman. A life full of memories, routines, inside jokes, kids, holidays, bills, fights, and all the mess in between. So if she wanted to burn it down, fine. But I wasn't going to let her hold the match and the lighter fluid. I needed more than a name and a hotel receipt. I needed to know who Ethan was. I needed to know if this was some midlife crisis fling or a full-blown second life. I needed to know how deep it went, not just for divorce papers or court or whatever, but for me. Because someday, maybe months or years down the line, I was going to want to sleep again without replaying every detail in my head. And for that to happen, I needed the whole picture. So I started digging. I made a fake email. Generic. Clean. Something I could use without tying it to my name. I reached out to the hotel pretending to be her assistant, asking for a copy of her lost itinerary. They sent it without question. She'd stayed there 3 times over the past 2 months. Same guest listed on each reservation, Ethan Caldwell. That name stuck with me. Caldwell. I didn't recognize it, not a family friend, not a coworker of hers, not someone I'd ever heard her mention. I did a little searching online. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, the usual suspects. Took some time, but I eventually found him. Sales director at a luxury automotive dealership. Divorced. 2 kids. Lived in the next town over. And wouldn't you know it? His dealership had sponsored a charity event Kathy attended last fall. She even dragged me to it. I remember the flyer now, sitting on the fridge for weeks. She wore a dark blue dress, the one I told her made her look like a movie star. I remember thinking how lucky I was. Apparently, so did Ethan. The more I found, the more I realized this wasn't just a fling. This was curated. Intentional. Maybe even emotional. That's when the shift happened. I went from hurt to calm. Not numb. Not cold. Just calm. Because now, I had a plan. You know how people say revenge is best served cold? They're wrong. It's not about temperature, it's about timing. And I wasn't looking for revenge anyway. I just wanted clarity. Maybe some dignity. A little control, after months of being played like a fool. I started with the basics. Backed up our financial records, bank statements, credit card transactions, anything that looked off. She had a few charges from boutique stores and restaurants I'd never heard of. Nothing flashy, just subtle enough to blend in with normal life. That was her style. Low-key. Quiet lies. I opened a new savings account in my name only. Transferred a portion of our shared money. Nothing that would set off alarms. Just enough to keep me stable if things went sideways. Then I met with a lawyer. Didn't even tell my best friend. Just booked an appointment, drove to a plain office building with appealing parking lot, and sat across from a woman named Janine who had the eyes of someone who'd seen it all, the cheaters, the heartbreak, the strategic exits. She asked if I was sure. I said I wasn't. Not yet. But I wanted to be ready. She gave me the basics. What I'd need. What to avoid doing. How not to tip my hand too early. Keep things normal, she said. Don't make her suspicious. Don't move out. Don't stop contributing. The law sees everything. So I kept my routine airtight. Smiled over dinner. Cleaned up the dishes. Cracked jokes. Made coffee in the morning and kissed her on the forehead on my way out the door. And all the while, I was setting tripwires. I changed my passwords. Unlinked my personal email from our shared accounts. Started forwarding all-important correspondence to a private inbox. If she noticed, she didn't say anything. Then, I installed a cheap motion-activated camera in the garage, angled just enough to catch the door leading into the house. Not because I thought she'd bring someone and she wasn't that bold, but because I needed confirmation. Timestamps. Visuals. Call it insurance. I also started writing things down. A little notebook, tucked into my car's glove box. Dates, times, places. When she said one thing and did another. It felt petty at first, but soon it started to feel like therapy. Like I was reclaiming something, my version of the story. Because for months, I'd been living in her version. The one where everything was fine, and I was just the oblivious husband on cruise control. Not anymore. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not friends. Not family. Not even the lawyer again. This was mine. She still thought she had the upper hand. Still smiled like nothing had changed. Still left for her Pilates classes and book club nights. Let her. I was setting the stage. And when the time came, I'd be ready to pull the curtain. Once you start looking at someone through a different lens, it's like everything they do gets reprocessed through a filter you didn't even know existed. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was a person living two lives, and mine was the one she wore like an old sweater. Comfortable. Familiar. Disposable. The GPS tracker was still running quietly under her car, feeding me updates like clockwork. Most days were normal: grocery store, work, home. Then, Thursdays and Fridays would roll around, and suddenly she'd be somewhere else. Hotels. Shopping centers. Once, even a restaurant where she told me she had lunch with an old college friend. The receipt I pulled later showed 2 entrees and a bottle of wine. Real casual. I started piecing it together like a jigsaw puzzle no one asked for. One night, I noticed a note in her planner. Yeah, she still used a paper one that said, e-coffee. I stared at it for 5 minutes. Not because it was a smoking gun, but because it was so casual. Like I didn't exist. She wasn't hiding anything carefully. She just assumed I wasn't looking. That hurt in a weird way, not even worth the effort of deception. Just assumed I'd be too checked out, too dumb, too trusting to notice. That's the part they don't talk about with betrayal. It's not always the cheating itself that crushes you. It's the erasure. The way you're slowly edited out of someone's story until you're just background noise. I used to be the first person she texted when she saw something funny, or when the car made a weird sound. Now, I was the guy who replaced the air filters and kept the fridge stocked. And Ethan, the more I dug, the more I hated him in this dull, exhausted kind of way. He had that smarmy car salesman charm. His social media was full of cocktails, gym selfies, and quotes about living your truth. He had a gold watch and 2 ex-wives. Honestly, it felt cliché. But apparently, cliché was exactly what she wanted. One night she left her iPad charging on the couch. She usually took it upstairs, but maybe she slipped. Maybe she didn't care anymore. It was unlocked. I didn't go snooping. Not really. I just opened the Messages app because it was already glowing on the screen. There he was. Ethan. He sent her a photo of some fancy dinner setup. Candlelight, wine, soft lighting. She replied with a heart emoji and said, "Better than our anniversary at that Italian place. Remember?" Yeah, I remembered. I remembered making the reservation, ironing my shirt, and watching her barely touch her meal while she scrolled through her phone half the night. I remember trying to tell her how much she meant to me and getting a distracted in return. Now I knew why. She had been mentally checked out for a while. I was just too loyal or too naive to see it. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was living an entirely different life in parallel with mine. A version of her that smiled more, dressed up, flirted freely, told jokes I never heard, and apparently made anniversary comparisons with a guy who sells cars and probably says, "Let me be real with you," at least once a day. I didn't say anything that night. Or the next. I was done being blindsided. I was taking notes now. Watching. Waiting. Let her have her fake candlelit dinners and her motivational quote boyfriend. I had something better, the truth. And it was about to get very, very real. I didn't expect to see them. I didn't even mean to be there. I was running an errand, picking up a part for the lawn mower, of all things. Something I'd normally put off until the weekend, but for whatever reason, I felt like getting it done that Tuesday. I pulled into the lot of a hardware store, parked, and as I was walking toward the entrance, I saw them. At first, it didn't register. She was wearing sunglasses and a light jacket, hair pulled back. He had his arm casually slung over her shoulder, like it belonged there. Like it had been there before. They weren't doing anything outrageous. No kissing. No drama. Just walking. Together. Easy. Comfortable. But that's what got me. The comfort. That's not how people move when they're having a fling. That's how people move when they think they belong to each other. She laughed at something he said, and he touched her lower back, that small, familiar touch that you don't give someone unless you've done it 1,000 times before. And just like that, something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not violently. Just a quiet, final click, like a light going out. I ducked back behind a row of cars before they could see me. My heart was thumping like I'd just run a marathon. But my hands? Steady. I pulled out my phone. Took a few photos. Not to show her. Not to confront her. Just to have. Just to remember that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't imagining it all. They walked into a little bakery next to the hardware store. Probably one of their places. Maybe she told him she liked the bread there. Maybe he said it reminded him of Paris, or some other recycled line. I stayed hidden. I didn't go inside. I didn't want a scene. I didn't need to ask questions I already had answers to. I just stood there, watching the woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd built a life with play pretend in someone else's storyline. And she looked happy. That's the part that burned the most. She looked like she was in on some secret, like she was living out the highlight reel while I was stuck in the blooper reel. And the longer I watched, the more I realized something brutal. This wasn't new. They had rhythms, inside jokes, physical shorthand. That kind of intimacy doesn't grow in a month. This had been going on a while. I left before they came out. I didn't want her to see me. Not yet. I wasn't done watching. And the game wasn't over. But that was the trigger, the moment the act cracked open wide enough for the truth to walk through in daylight. I didn't need to spy anymore. Now I just needed to decide what to do with everything I knew. When I got home that night, she was already there. She was in the kitchen, barefoot, humming to herself, chopping up vegetables like she hadn't just spent her afternoon wrapped up in someone else's orbit. Like she hadn't just smiled that smile at another man, the one I used to think was mine. And I almost said it. The words were right there, perched at the edge of my throat like birds ready to fly. But I didn't. I stood there in the doorway for a second too long. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled, just a flicker. Asked me how my day was. I said it was fine. Quiet. Productive. Then I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to figure out what kind of man I was. Was I weak for not confronting her? Was I strong for waiting? I don't know. Depends who you ask, I guess. All I knew was I couldn't give her the satisfaction of watching me break. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She came up later with a glass of wine and asked if I wanted to watch something. I told her I was tired. Which wasn't a lie. I was tired in the way concrete probably feels tired after years of holding up a bridge. She shrugged and disappeared into the other room. I could hear the TV playing some mindless reality show she liked, the kind with too much screaming and not enough substance. And I lay there in the dark thinking about all the times we'd laughed at those shows together. The shared eye rolls. The jokes. The little comments we whispered between scenes. Now all of it felt fake. Or worse, real, but irrelevant. She'd chosen another life. Slipped into it like a second skin. Left me standing in the empty shed of what used to be us. But still, I didn't confront her. Because I realized something that night. She didn't deserve my rage. She didn't even deserve my heartbreak. She deserved my absence. I was building towards something. I didn't know exactly what yet, but it was bigger than a single shouting match in a kitchen full of chopped carrots and lies. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to exit and make sure she noticed the quiet when I was gone. Once you know someone's lying, it's incredible how often they trip over their own words. Like watching a magician flub a trick because you already know where the wires are. She started getting sloppy. It wasn't big things at first. Just little cracks. One night she told me she was having dinner with her coworker, Lauren, said they were catching up after work. But I remembered something from her phone calendar, which she used religiously. Lauren had requested time off to go to Arizona that week. Visiting family. I nodded. Didn't call her out. Just filed it under busted line number 17. Then there was the time she came home flustered, said traffic was brutal. GPS history showed she'd been parked at a lake about 45 minutes away. No restaurant nearby. No yoga studio. Just a walking trail and a few secluded picnic areas. Guess Ethan liked nature. I noticed she stopped bringing up Ethan's name entirely, not that she ever really did in the first place. But before, she'd mention work events or people she bumped into during errands. Now? Silence. Like her life outside our house had been scrubbed clean. Almost too clean. And when I did ask how her day was, she gave these short, generic answers like she was scared to give me details. It was good. Nothing exciting. Same old. That used to bother me, back when I believed her. Now it just confirmed that she was walking on eggshells, too. One evening, I asked offhandedly how her sister's dog was doing. She blinked at me like I'd just asked her to recite the periodic table. Then she recovered and said, "Oh, yeah, she's doing fine. Her sister doesn't have a dog. Never has." I made that up. She didn't catch it. That's when I knew she was lying reflexively now, not just to me, but to herself. Living in this tangled web where truth was optional, and keeping her story straight was becoming too much work. I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good, in a quiet, sad kind of way. Not revenge. Just confirmation. Like watching a building you used to live in get condemned, you don't want to cheer, but you can't deny it was falling apart anyway. The more I watched, the more detached I felt. I stopped trying to figure out what went wrong. Stopped blaming myself for the things I didn't say or didn't see. She had made her choices. Repeatedly. Deliberately. And now, her foundation was starting to crack under the weight of her own fiction. But still, I kept the act going. Played dumb. Smiled when she talked about her day. Asked if she needed anything from the store. Because the finish line was in sight. I just had to time my step. There's a certain kind of power in knowing something someone else doesn't know you know. It's quiet. Controlled. Kind of like holding a loaded gun but choosing not to fire it, yet. That was me. She was still going through the motions, still playing house while sneaking out the back window. But her stories had gone soft, her alibis thin. It was like she was running out of energy to keep up the show, and she didn't realize I was sitting front row with the script in my lap. Then, an opportunity fell into my lap, pure luck. Or maybe just the universe giving me a nudge. She left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. Nothing new there. But this time, she was logged into her email. And there it was. A message from Ethan. Subject line, next weekend. I didn't even have to click it. The preview said enough. Can't wait to see you again. You looked incredible yesterday. If we get that extra night. That was it. That was my moment. I didn't open the email. I just took a photo of the screen with my phone. Simple. Clean. Time-stamped. Then I opened a fresh document on my own laptop and started compiling. Screenshots from the GPS tracker. Photos from the hardware store lot. Bank charges. Calendar inconsistencies. The printed hotel reservation. And now, this email. None of it was dramatic on its own. But stacked together, it painted a picture. Not just of infidelity, but of a pattern. A quiet betrayal repeated over weeks, maybe months. Maybe longer. And the best part? She didn't know I had any of it. That's when the power dynamic shifted. I wasn't the confused husband anymore, stumbling around in the dark trying to piece things together. Now I was the one holding the cards. Calm. Patient. Waiting. I backed everything up. Cloud storage. USB drive. A second copy email to a secure account I created just for this. Not because I was planning to blow it up, but because I needed to know I could, if I wanted to. The leash was off. I wasn't scared of what I might lose anymore. I was wondering what she was going to lose. And the wildest part? She still kissed me goodnight like nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. And now, it was only a matter of time. I used to think leaving someone meant failure. That if I walked away, I was quitting on something sacred. Marriage. Family. Commitment. All the things we're taught to protect, no matter how chipped or broken they get. But the thing is, I wasn't leaving Kathy. She'd already left me. Emotionally, physically, whatever label you want to slap on it. She just hadn't packed a bag and said the words out loud. But everything else? Yeah, she was gone. And now it was my turn. Quietly. Cleanly. On my terms. The plan wasn't dramatic. No yelling matches or courtroom bombshells. I wasn't looking for fireworks. I wanted closure. So I started preparing. First, I opened a new checking account, my name only. Slowly started routing my paychecks there. She didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't care enough to ask. That told me plenty. I also met with Janine again, the lawyer. This time, I told her everything. Showed her the file. Let her walk me through next steps like I was planning a business exit, not the end of a 17-year marriage. She said I was smart to gather evidence first. Said it would give me options, leverage, if it came to that. She also reminded me to stay quiet. Don't tip my hand. Don't move out until it's time. Keep the mask on a little longer. So I did. I played the part. Took the trash out. Asked about her day. Kissed her cheek when I left for work. She smiled less now, probably distracted by her fantasy life. Or maybe she was starting to feel something shift. Hard to say. And while she was wrapped up in Ethan's texts and long lunches, I was wrapping up my exit. I made a list of everything I'd need to grab when the time came, essentials, keepsakes, things that mattered to me. Not the TV or the couch or the matching towels. Just the pieces of my life I didn't want her hands on anymore. I also wrote a letter. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. Just honest. A few pages long. About what I knew. What I saw. How I felt. It wasn't for closure, not for her. Anyway, it was for me, so I wouldn't be tempted to explain it all face-to-face later. No breakdowns. No guilt trips. Just the truth. That letter sat sealed in a drawer for a week before I printed it. I planned to leave it on the counter the morning I walked out. No fight. No confrontation. Just a note, a key, and a man who finally chose peace. It was a Thursday morning when I left. No special reason for the day. No poetic timing. Just Thursday. She was asleep when I got up. I watched her for a second, not in a creepy way, just taking it in. That was the last time I'd see her like that. Peaceful. Unaware. Still wrapped in the safety of a lie she thought was working. I took a shower. Got dressed like I was going to work. Packed the last of my things into the car the night before: toothbrush, some clothes, the letter. I made coffee like I always did. Didn't drink it. Left the cup steaming on the kitchen counter beside the note. It said everything I needed it to say. No insults. No bitterness. Just the facts. The GPS, the emails, the photos. I told her I knew. I told her I'd known for a while. And I told her she didn't have to lie anymore. Not to me. Not to herself. I left the house key on top of the envelope. I stood at the door for a second, hand on the knob, waiting to feel something. Guilt. Sadness. Fear. But there was nothing. Just quiet. And then I walked out. The sun was just starting to rise. Everything looked normal. Like the world didn't care that a 17-year marriage had just ended in silence. I didn't look back. Didn't pause for one last glance at the porch we used to drink wine on. Didn't check if she'd woken up. That was the whole point. I wasn't giving her a goodbye. Not after everything. Not when I'd spent months watching her give that smile, that attention, that affection to someone else. She didn't deserve my pain. She didn't even get my anger. She just got the truth on paper. And I got out. It's strange how fast silence can become familiar. The first night alone, I stayed at a cheap motel on the edge of town. Nothing special, just clean sheets and a working lock. I sat on the edge of the bed with a fast food burger in my lap and realized something that hit harder than I expected. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even sad, really. Just hollow. Not the kind of emptiness that screams. More like the kind that hums quietly in the background, like the buzz of an old refrigerator. Always there. Just soft enough to ignore, until you stop moving. That's when it creeps in. I thought I'd feel relief. Maybe even freedom. But the truth is, when you build your life around someone, even the wrong someone, tearing it down doesn't give you wings. It just leaves rubble. Some nights I replay things in my head. Not the betrayals, but the good stuff. The way she used to dance in the kitchen barefoot. Sunday morning pancakes. The time we both laughed so hard at a dumb movie we had to pause it. I wonder how much of it was real. And how much was just me believing in the version of us I wanted to be true. There's this question that keeps showing up in my brain, no matter how many times I try to shove it away. Was I not enough? I know it's not the right question. I know cheating isn't about who got cheated on. It's about the one who couldn't face their own emptiness. But logic and emotion don't always share the same map, do they? Some days I feel okay. Other days, not so much. I haven't told many people. Not yet. I don't want to explain it. Don't want the pity or the cliches. Time heals. You'll find someone better. Everything happens for a reason. I'm not looking for a silver lining. I'm just looking for peace. And maybe, someday, for someone who chooses honesty over excitement. Depth over convenience. Someone who sees loyalty not as a bonus, but as the bare minimum. But right now, I'm just a guy in a motel room, staring out the window, drinking bad coffee, and learning how to breathe again. She has her life. I have mine now. And whatever comes next, at least it'll be real.